To welcome everyone to tonight's Careers in Consulting Virtual Alumni Panel. I'm Julie Drzezinski. I'm the Director of Employer Engagement in the Center for Career Development. I'm also a Holy Cross alum, class of '99. And we're really excited to have 5 fabulous alumni panelists here tonight from various areas across consulting, various firms. We're gonna have them all introduce themselves in a few minutes to share their perspectives. So thank you to all the alums for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us here tonight. Before I turn it over to Becky, students, thanks for taking the time. I know it's a busy time in the semester, so thank you for taking the time to join us and be here tonight to listen and to join us. If you're able to turn your cameras on, it's always nice to see faces, so I would encourage you to do that if that's possible. And then I'll turn it over to Becky to introduce herself, and then we'll get started.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Becky. I work in the Center for Career Development, specifically with students interested in business consulting and finance. And so after this conversation, if you haven't met with me already, I encourage you to do so that we can chat about next steps for you to get your foot in the door in consulting or in any field that interests you. Just to reiterate what Julie said, we're so appreciative of everyone's time tonight. And without further ado, we will get started. So I'm going to have each alumni introduce yourself, introduce your name, your class year, what your major was, and your current role. I'm going to put that in the chat so that you don't forget. And we will start with Dan. So that would be your name, class year, major, and your current role.
Sure, sounds good. Thanks, Becky. Hey, everybody. Good to see a bunch of faces on here. I'm Dan Donahue, class of 2018. Myself and Kate. I see you on. Shout out our class here. I'm currently a senior associate or senior analyst at Ernst & Young, doing specifically financial services work, in particular to sustainable finance and climate risk and climate strategy.
Thanks, Dan. We'll pass it over to Julia.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Metzger. I graduated in 2019. I was a double econ and French major, and I work currently for Haggerty Consulting. It's an emergency management consulting firm. I'm a managing associate, but with the client, I'm actually the state agency lead, so working with California state agencies on their COVID expenses and submitting them for federal reimbursement. Thanks.
Thanks, Julia. Moving on to Kate.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Hershey. I am a senior associate, or I prefer to say ESG and sustainability consultant with Riveron Consulting. I was an environmental studies major and the peace and conflict concentration when I was at Holy Cross.
Very cool. That is a very classic liberal arts degree that you have received. Moving on over to Kyle.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kyle Irvin. I graduated from Holy Cross in 2021. I was an economics and music double major, and I'm currently a senior associate consultant at a boutique Boston-based firm called Hayden Consulting Group, working in the life sciences on market access and commercialization strategy for pharmaceuticals.
Fantastic. Thank you. And finally, Carl.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carl. I'm rounding out the group here, and unfortunately, I'm the oldest of this group, which makes me even feel older. But I graduated in 2013. I was an econ major. I work at a company called BRG. They're a consulting group. I'm actually out of Boston. I flex between Boston and New York City. Our group does a variety of different types of consulting roles, which is why I'm on this. But the majority of my time is spent evaluation, and I'm happy to talk more about what that means if interested. So thanks for having me tonight.
Great. Thanks, everyone. So as you can see, we have quite a variety of alumni with us tonight, and I think it would be really helpful to provide a little bit more context. So could each of you share what is a typical day like for you? And if that's too difficult because each day is different, maybe share what a week to week might look like and some of the responsibilities you have. So we'll go in the same order, starting with Dan again.
Right on the spot, Becky. I'm going to take you up on the opportunity to describe more of a week or month over month experience. I'm sure the other panelists here will agree it tends to be a little difficult to go day to day, but I can speak to my current project essentially, which is good timing, wrapping up at the end of this week. It's been about a year and a half. What we've helped our client do essentially over the last year and a half is take stock of what their financial portfolio across the entire enterprise looks like in the face of climate change. So essentially trying to project out from the current period of time out until 2050, and trying to understand the socioeconomic impact across that entire time. So, both the risks associated with the financial transition from a really oil dependent world to say a clean energy, clean economy world, as well as trying to factor in just the physical risks that are associated with things like hurricanes and increased natural disaster. And thirdly, just political, socioeconomic considerations that are a little harder to pinpoint. But essentially what it's been for the last 18 months is the build out of that, and trying to help them understand again how it impacts their portfolio, and then eventually flipping that into being fully integrated into what they do in their day-to-day business, and having those types of economic or climate considerations be impacting their economic decision making.
Awesome. So just a few responsibilities that you have.
Just a few.
Great. Thank you. And moving on to Julia.
Thank you. Yes, as I mentioned, I'm working with California state agencies, so primarily the California Office of Emergency Services, and we're actually embedded within the client's operations. So I sit at a cubicle, and around me are state workers, and we're kind of scattered throughout their operations. And so on the day-to-day and month-to-month, it's a lot of meeting with my team, making sure that we're all on the same page, and then also meeting with Cal OES, which is our client, sharing best practices with them, making sure that if there's new federal policy for the reimbursement program or deadlines, that everyone understands them. And then we also serve in similar capacities as those workers, as those state workers. So we work externally with other state agencies to do similar functions as Cal OES, and coordinate on a state level as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Julia. Next we have Kate.
Yeah, so I think from what you can gather from everyone, definitely a day-to-day looks different every day, which makes it very exciting. But for me, I specialize in ESG and sustainability communications and strategy. So my firm as a whole does kind of like business advisory. So my specific function is I'll have my kind of book of clients that I work with and meet with on a regular basis, and just try to figure out what are their sustainability priorities. So for some of them, it's just admittedly, I like a check the box exercise. What do they really need to do? What sort of policies do they need to have? What does their greenhouse gas inventories look like? What are their climate risk assessments? And so doing things like that. But what I really enjoy doing with some of our clients is more of the kind of enthusiastic brand management of their ESG and sustainability programs. So really making sure what are they doing for their employees? What are they doing for their communities? And kind of really embedding that as part of their company culture and part of their company impact, and always assigning the monetary value to all of those programs. So get to write a lot of sustainability reports, write policies, and many more things.
Yeah, it sounds very fulfilling, but also challenging. Moving on over to Kyle.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I work at a relatively specialized firm within the life sciences, and a lot of our work and my work recently has been around a lot of different pharmaceutical brands that are launching. And as you can imagine, I like to say that, people always think of pharma as, research and development. And then there's kind of a bit of a gray area of what happens after a drug is getting ready to be approved. And then you see commercials for it, or your doctor's talking about it, or you go and you get a prescription for it. And I like to think that we do everything in between there. So a lot of our work personally and as our firm has been focused on all of the different considerations that go into from post-approval to actually launching, under a brand name, getting to doctors' offices. And the way that I always describe my job to people is, if you ever see a drug commercial, and at the end, you have the voice that's talking really fast about all the different side effects, all the long labels. And at the end, they say eligible patients can pay as little as $5 for their prescription of Humira, Enbrel, whatever it is. A lot of the work that we do is designing those types of programs and all the considerations that go into that, payer contracting, all that fun stuff. But one of the things that I like about working at a smaller firm, we have about 40 employees right now, is all of the other things that go into consulting beyond the project work. So learning and development for new hires, business development, all that fun stuff as project work ebbs and flows. So a little bit of everything.
Awesome. Thank you, Kyle. And finally, Carl.
Yeah, so I think like most have said, it varies day to day, but my title is as I said, is associate director, which is in valuation. A lot of it is client driven, varies by engagement. Engagements can be anywhere from a quick turn within a week to years of engagement with a client. A client could be a private equity fund or a different type of fund, hedge funds, VCs. We could also have clients that are attorneys that will do work with attorneys on behalf of other clients in litigation situations. So when you think, a lot of it is M&A and capital markets driven work, where we will have to do evaluation of a particular business. It could be in any sector. It could be healthcare, it could be energy, it could be tech. We're pretty general at our firm. We do have a very heavy healthcare arm as well on the other side of our house. But day to day could be handling a variety of these engagements that have different timelines. So you're constantly juggling projects and trying to get everything done for your clients on time and done to a professional level. So that's primarily only within valuation. We do something called turnaround and restructuring. So companies that are distressed, you think the cryptocurrency space, think financial services right now, SVB, these buzzwords that I'm sure you're reading about and wherever you get your information from. We're plugged into those and doing work for them in real time. We'll do diligence. We'll help companies and clients sell assets and actual companies within their portfolios. So we do a variety in the business services space. So a lot to unpack, but it keeps it exciting day to day.
That's great. Thank you, everyone, for providing that context. I think for students who are interested in consulting, it's helpful to think about whether they want to be at a specialized firm or a more general one. And so to hear all of your day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, or even year-to-year is really helpful. So this question, anybody can really popcorn in. What are some ways that people working in consulting, whether it's at your company or just as consultants that you know of, are making a difference in the world? So kind of a broad question. Anyone can chime in here. What are some ways that people working in consulting are making a difference in the world?
I can start. This is definitely a hard question to answer, but generally speaking, consultants make institutions better, their clients better. Just, on a personal level, it's always good to kind of look at yourself from an outside perspective, and consultants are able to offer that perspective by not working, at that firm. So I think, generally that's what I would say for what makes how consultants make a difference.
Definitely. Thanks, Julia. If this question is too hard, we could also say what is fulfilling about your work as a consultant and how you feel like you're making a difference as well.
I'll jump in and take it in a different direction with what we do. So when a company is struggling, literally to the point where they're going to go bankrupt, they'll come and hire us and say, hey, how can you fix our business? Real big names, companies that you would hear about in the news will come to us and we'll have to put an action plan together very quickly to then turn them around. We'll have to figure out ways to, maximize different revenue streams and hopefully, work on costs, a more effective cost structure that can be sustainable in a very, varying market right now, condition wise. So that keeps it very exciting and fulfilling because, you'll be a part of this company like a Bed Bath & Beyond, and you'll be doing this work. And all of a sudden you'll read about it after a deal closes that you were implementing something to help them get back on their feet. So that is, where you can really feel an accomplishment on a daily basis.
Definitely.
I think a cool part of consulting is that it's such a broad field that depending on what you're interested in, you can absolutely find a niche for that. So whether it looks like pursuing your passion. So for me, sustainability absolutely was something that I wanted to incorporate into my career. But it also happened that I could do so in the context of a kind of business framework, which also had a lot of appeal to me, which made something that I was passionate about take on much more of like a tactical, impactful, making a difference, but also gets me excited about my job for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I would say, going off of Julia's point, I think another cool thing that I've noticed about consulting, especially, in the industry that I sit in, is that so many of our clients spend, their whole career working at one company or, in pharma, working on one brand, and being able to, myself and certainly my leadership, bring a variety of different perspectives from working with different clients, working on different brands, and really be able to teach a client about something that's really important and be able to bring innovative solutions. Because, at the end of the day, to Carl's point too, like when I see commercials and, you see the end and you say, hey, that was our recommendation. That's really cool. And at the end of the day, without getting on a soapbox about the US healthcare reimbursement system, I do think where we sit in market access, we do literally make a difference in bringing access and affordability to patients to, at the end of the day, serve their health.
Great. Thanks, Kyle. Any final thoughts on this question before we move along?
Great. It's really nice to hear just different perspectives and just the different ways that you're all kind of making an impact across the different industries that you're consulting in. So thanks for sharing that. So I think what Becky and I were hoping to do is to kind of shift gears a little bit and focus on kind of thinking back. And for some of you, it was more recent than others, but when you first kind of like broke into the industry. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about like what your first job was out of college and maybe how that related to what you're doing today. And really how you kind of broke into the consulting industry, whether it was that first job or whether it was something else. So anyone can jump in.
Julie, my first job was my first job, but it's interesting. I'll speak to this just from a larger firm perspective, and folks on who are at more of the specialized firms can speak to that. But within EY in particular, I kind of just came in through a pretty typical route, I would say, for a lot of Holy Cross kids, just walking into the internship with the business consulting program within the financial services office, which is, a pretty well-trodden path at this point. And to be frank with everybody, I did not really enjoy my first position at EY. I really thought I was going to leave consulting in general. I really was downtrodden on it. But the great part of a place like EY or just consulting in general, and Kate was touching on this earlier, it's such a wide reaching field and there's so many options for you within it that if you're not happy where you are, it's really if you take on the onus for yourself, you can really make what you want out of it and get to a place where you are feeling fulfilled in your career and feel like you're in the right place and consulting is for you. That took me, luckily it only took me about 4 months after getting, full-time here at EY, but for some it takes a little longer than others. But I would, encourage that or reiterate that there's kind of no right or wrong about it. It's a lot of steering your own ship and you can find your way into a niche and I promise you can find a place that you like as long as you kind of just keep at it and keep doing things like this and talking to other folks, both your peers and those kind of in a position that you want to be in already, and just trying to essentially talk your way through it to figure out where that niche may be.
Yeah. So in a little different career path route, I started off in nonprofit, which is the only thing that I thought I could do with my very liberal arts degree. So I was working for a nonprofit that was in fact actually really struggling financially. And so they enlisted the support of a consulting firm to try to reconfigure the business, figure out what they could do better. In talking to the consultants, I realized that that actually sounded more like the career that I wanted, in much more of a dynamic and challenging atmosphere. And so made the jump into consulting there. But after a couple years at that firm, I was also feeling similarly unfulfilled. I was doing technology implementations and change management, which is really interesting. But I always knew that like my passion was in sustainability, and I knew that there were consultants out there who were doing something that I wanted to do. So like Dan said, that's when I just started sending LinkedIn messages and emails to everybody that I knew that had my role or people that I aspired to be in that profession, and ended up at the firm where I am now. So good advice, Dan.
I guess I'll go next as I'm rounding up the decade here, unfortunately. Been almost out for 10 years. And I think my advice also, I'm going to take this question in a different direction, is just wherever you end up, it's not even close to the end, right? Like I'm 10 years out and who knows where the next, unfortunately, 30 years are going to go. So keep that in mind when you're making your decision. It's not the end all be all. You can pivot as we've talked about already a few times, but I think like most of you all, you're probably going the path of internship into a full-time job, or reaching out through your network, and then that's all stuff that we would encourage to do. Holy Cross is really strong for that, and people like to give back. So it's good that you're a part of this tonight. I started off with GE Capital, General Electric. GE Capital has since then sort of imploded, but I was there before they decided to spin off that big business, and they were essentially a bank. They were the 6th largest bank actually at the time, so people don't really know about them anymore. But I did 2 summer internships with them through the career development services at Holy Cross. Luckily got that, and then I started there full time. It was a broad finance role, nothing to do with consulting. Had no, consulting was a buzzword to me at that time, really. And just figured I would try to figure out as much as I could about finance and what I like, what I don't like. I ended up going from there to Blackstone, which is a private equity fund, and they do a variety of other stuff. But I was there for 4 years, again, not in a consulting role at all, just doing work on behalf of the firm, valuation specific. And then from there, an opportunity came to do consulting work in that practice line that I was doing internally for that. So that's where I finally put on my consulting hat. What was that? 6-7 years out of school to start doing this work on behalf of clients. So, and I've been doing that now for 4 years. So my point is just don't worry about your titles, try to learn, try to be passionate about whatever you're doing, and the career will make itself.
Thank you. Julia, Kyle, you want to add to anything?
Sure, I'll go next. So I graduated in May of 2019, and then I was scheduled to depart in February of 2020 for the Peace Corps in Senegal. So I was actually there for about a month, and then we were evacuated because of COVID. So this 2-year plan that I had set up after graduation kind of fell apart. And obviously the job market was not ideal to return to. And so FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, was heavily recruiting Peace Corps evacuees. And this wasn't something that I was really interested in. But I thought, I don't know what this industry is. Let me look into it. Attended some of these FEMA webinars and thought that emergency management sounded interesting. And also that I would be working with something that kind of impacted my career already. So I might as well make an opportunity out of it. And then I also thought to myself, there's probably a private sector equivalent that I could find. I don't really want to work for the federal government. And that's when I started doing research and found Haggerty Consulting. And so it's definitely not something that I anticipated 4 years ago when, I was a senior in college, but it just kind of unfolded naturally, and definitely just taking your career one step at a time is kind of how it naturally unfolds.
Great, thank you. How about you, Kyle?
Yeah, and I can round out with probably the most boring answer on the panel. So I graduated in May of 2021, and I've been with Hayden since I graduated. So not a lot there, but I will say, as I mentioned earlier, I was an econ and music double major, and I had absolutely no intentions of going into consulting when I was thinking about what I wanted to do after graduation until really, 6 or 7 months before I graduated. So it kind of all came at once, and I was very not expecting it at all. But like everyone else on the panel has said, really been, enjoying it just based on being able to answer new questions every day. So regardless of if you think you're interested or not, definitely something to pursue, and definitely, something for everyone in terms of all the niche practice areas that you can consult in.
Definitely. Great. Thank you all. So I think it's so interesting to just hear that like there isn't one specific typical, I think a lot of times we all want like, tell me what to do. Here's the next steps. And sometimes it's a windy path, right? And so, which is great. And so I think hopefully students, kind of taking that into account and really thinking about ways to kind of gain some exposure and really kind of suss out what makes sense for you, and that path for you, it might look a little different for everyone. So as we kind of think about, kind of for those students, thinking about consulting, I would love to hear from the alums around like, if you're a student that wants to kind of start out in the industry, are there some really good places to kind of begin a career in consulting, and or like what are some common like entry-level positions that students can kind of keep their eyes peeled for? So any advice there?
I know, Julie, we are very well versed with the EY pipeline, so I'll just speak to that briefly a little bit. I think pretty consistently we have a good consulting presence on campus. So for those of you who are interested in financial services and are looking for either an internship or a full-time, that would come around, pretty soon after coming back to campus in the fall with whatever cycle you're on, whether you're, a junior or senior at that point. And that happens pretty quickly. And then there's national program, which is basically just non-financial services specific, that tends to roll throughout the year. My biggest advice to everybody on this call, regardless of whether you're applying to EY or any other firm, is come to campus prepared, whatever that first fall semester is, to apply. Have your resume in a good spot, go see Julie and Becky, get it reviewed, make sure you're in a good place so you can kind of hit their ground running, because it happens really, really fast. And that's not only EY, that's a lot of firms out there who just churn it in. So you got to make sure you're on top of it and ready to go. Strike while the iron's hot.
Exactly. Thank you, Dan. Other thoughts from other alums?
I know in the two kind of mid-sized consulting firms I've worked for, they traditionally haven't posted like entry-level positions, but that isn't to say that we don't actually hire entry-level people. So apologies if this is just like my experience with these places, but I've been on the hiring team, and I also do know that they are totally open to hiring like college seniors. But they prefer it to be more on like an outreach basis instead of doing campus recruiting. So yeah, still have your resumes ready and just be willing to do that level of outreach, and get yourself like an in. Sometimes that can be super advantageous. Full disclosure, also a lot of consulting firms will have hiring bonuses. So like there's a lot of incentive for people to recruit. So for example, if you were to like reach out to me saying, I'm really interested in this position, then you and I could have a chat, see if it's something that kind of aligns with what you would like to do. And then I would then go to like my hiring department and say, like, just talk to this student from my college, think they're a great candidate, and here's their resume. So get comfortable doing that outreach. There's no shame in like cold emailing, cold LinkedIn messaging. If it's something that you're really interested in, come with questions, come interested, and of course, Holy Cross alum will always love talking to you. But people are generally very kind with their time if it is something that you really want to do.
Thank you, Kate.
I would say as a more recent alum, plug for Handshake. I actually found my current role on Handshake. And then when I was doing a bit of research, to Kate's point, I found out that one of our senior principals is a Holy Cross alum. And I had a conversation with her, and it was the biggest, wow, this feels like such an informal conversation, yet it's a job interview. And that's how I ended up where I am now. So definitely I would look on Handshake. Do the on-campus recruiting, look for any, analyst, associate type positions, and do your homework. If you've never heard of the company before, go to their website, see what they do. If it's a more specialized firm like where I am, that's something that I found really interesting. I'd never heard of these things throughout the interview process. They seemed interesting. Look on Handshake, reach out to people, go on the company on LinkedIn, and they have the, 42 people from your school, click on that, see if you recognize anyone. Any of those little commonalities, we were on the same sports team, we had the same major, do you have 20 minutes for a chat? They will always say yes. I get them all the time. I'm sure everyone else on this panel gets them more often than I do. And you can always find 20 minutes for a chat. And that makes you stand out more in the interview process, where it's not just another resume in the pipeline. It's, oh, this person comes, recommended, referred by Kyle, Kate, whoever. And ultimately that also gives you a leg up in the interview process, in my experience.
Great. Thank you, Kyle. Anyone have anything else to add before we continue on?
I would add that if you're looking for a particular company or a particular sector, maybe don't focus as much on your job title at first. Really, once you get your foot in the door, you can explore internally. Obviously, during your interview process, you want to ask about internal growth and how you can expand or change your role in the company. But like getting your foot in the door is the best way to kind of start your career path in a particular field.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's really interesting as you hearing all of you talk. I mean, I think you are all such great examples of like different avenues and ways that you kind of entered into the industry. And I think when you're thinking about as a kind of entry level hire, it's the same kind of approach, right? Depending on the company, like a large company like an EY that tends to do some on-campus recruiting, don't miss out, take advantage of that. And then there's other kind of mid-sized boutique firms that where they're not going to do that. So you really need to do your homework, do your research, do some networking, do some outreach, and like really cast that wide net and kind of explore all opportunities and really understand what are the different ways to engage. So that was really great for you to all share those different perspectives. Thank you.
Yeah, this is all really great advice. At this point, we're a little over halfway done. So if any students have any questions, please feel empowered to pop them in the chat and we will get to them. So again, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat at any point. But if not, we will keep on moving through. So since we've been talking about hiring and students obviously want to market themselves to alumni and employers, what skills are necessary to be successful in the industry? Both technical skills, but also like personality traits. What are some things that employers are looking for? And how have you leveraged the skills that you've gained as a liberal arts student? So it's kind of a two-pronged question. What are some skills necessary, but also how have you leveraged the skills that you gained at Holy Cross? Anyone feel free to chime in here.
I'll go first. So I'm interviewing people all the time from a variety of different schools, and I think the skills we're looking for are just that you're aware that you're coming out of college and you're learning, and you're willing to do whatever it takes to get jobs done, within reason, right? But it's just having that, being able to communicate effectively. That's super, super critical, and that's to the question of what liberal arts offers is that. I mean, I think whether you're philosophy, econ, music, it doesn't matter. You're gonna be challenged to communicate, to write well. You're always communicating verbally, you might be communicating via emails, definitely trying to articulate whatever you're trying to advise on. So that communication skill is really important. But to my first point, make sure you're aware that, like, look, I'm learning, I'm trying to manage my time. I want to ask questions to my managers, sooner than later. Don't feel like it's a college test and you gotta finish it all on your own. Like, you have questions, raise them sooner than later, because you're going to make your manager and his manager's job or her manager's job easier. So, take all that into consideration and be proud of your purple, because it will differentiate you from other candidates who are also interviewing.
I would echo that big time. The communication piece, especially. I think there's nothing more important, at least, especially as you get kind of beyond that entry level, and once you start kind of progressing through your career more and more, the written and oral communication skill becomes paramount. And I don't know if there's anything that has driven success that I've seen, not only with myself in my career, but amongst my peers, than being able to be effective in that area. I think the biggest place where I personally struggled coming out of school, and where most Holy Cross kids frankly tend to struggle, are the technical skills. So being, good with Excel, good with PowerPoint, nothing on the curriculum at Holy Cross, because I think frankly like I said, the communication piece of it, we tend to outpace, other students or other, recent grads in that area. So staying sharp there, but doing your best to hit the ground floor when you start as a consultant with your Excel skills, with your PowerPoint skills, is not equally as important. I would still say the communication piece is first, but very, very important. And frankly, I was lagging so far behind my peers when I first got here that it was like genuinely a little concerning to start. So if there's any, time that you have and you have something set up, where there's maybe like a summer break, I would really encourage people to take an Excel crash course, take a PowerPoint crash course, do those types of things. And then obviously you kind of just rely on your Holy Cross education for the communication aspect.
That's really great advice. I think students oftentimes feel really stressed out that they might not compare to peers going to a specific business program or school. So this leads us really well into our next question, which is, how did you package yourself both on paper and during an interview for your first job after Holy Cross, especially entering into a field where maybe, we don't have a business program. We also don't have specific consulting related things on campus all the time. So how do you leverage your liberal arts degree? How do you leverage those skills and really package yourself to get your first role?
Kyle, I'm going to put you on the spot, Kyle, because you just did it.
Okay, fair enough.
How did
Julie,
you do
fair
it?
enough. Going back to what both Dan and Carl were talking about, it's really, I think it's knowing what you're good at and not having an explanation for, where those gaps that Becky was talking about, but showing that you have a willingness and an ability to learn. So like similar to Dan, especially when I first started as an associate, I was in a super technical role, like writing thousands of lines of code to look at, data that I, even as an econ major, barely scratched the surface of doing that. I had no idea how to do that. And I fully said in my rounds of interviews, in technical interviews, like, this is not something that I know how to do. But I think through, my transcript and through how I package myself in my resume, my cover letter, and my interviews, just showing that Holy Cross students can demonstrate that they're always learning. My transcript ranged from like music history to like quantitative methods in economics. And I said, I've never done this before, but I think that we all can demonstrate, and I'm sure all of your transcripts demonstrate, that you can learn and have a willingness and an appetite to learn about whatever that is. Even if you're at, a big four firm doing change management, you're going to be learning about different industries, all the time, every week, every project. And I've seen a lot of colleagues, some folks that I started with at my current company who have, left because they couldn't keep up with that at a far higher pace than people have left because they struggle writing Excel formulas. So packaging that and knowing what you're good at and being honest about what you're excited to learn about, I think really sets Holy Cross students apart. Both, myself having gone through it and having, read resumes and interviewed several Holy Cross students at my current company compared to a lot of other students, it sets people apart and it gets people excited about interviewing you and potentially having you on the team because it really is unique.
Thanks, Kyle. And I also want to plug that Kyle recently recorded a interview series video about case interviews. And I will send the link to all of the students who are here tonight and tomorrow morning. And that is a really good resource to reference, especially when you're feeling a little bit stressed or intimidated by the process, but also to utilize the network to be able to gain those skills and get advice to package yourself. So thank you, Kyle. I know we put you on the spot there. Before we move on to the next question, does anyone else have additional skills they want to call out or advice for students to package themselves for the application process?
I'd say lean, to Kyle's point, lean into being a Swiss Army knife. That's a strength of yours, and that's how it should be, right? You don't need to make any apologies about your background. You are at a great school. You have a great background. You all, I'm sure are majoring, and it doesn't even matter what you major in. I mean, like I day-to-day work with a Holy Cross guy who's 5 years older than me, who's a history and poli-sci double major, who's now made his fastest track possible to senior manager at EY. So really doesn't matter. Lean into being a Swiss Army knife, and again, like everybody has said, be willing to learn and communicate that you're willing to learn on the job, because frankly, they're going to want you to do it the way they want you to do it anyway. So even if you learned how to do a certain thing, you'd be relearning it on the job as is.
Awesome.
I think the one more thing that I would add is just interview well. It's the one thing that you actually do get to practice and be ready for. Even though it seems like, how could I do that? I don't know what questions they're going to ask. Everyone always asks the same question. Like, just have examples of everything you're ready to talk about. Have examples of times that you messed up, or times you did really well, or times you were a leader, and just go into that so ready and able to speak to your experience and tell stories. And then in doing so, you're demonstrating your communication skills or your ability to draw on experiences and apply it at other times in life. So yeah, practice for interviews. Just go in there ready and confident, and you really can't go wrong.
Yeah, I want to echo that point. I think it's super important. You don't be reactive on your interview. Be proactive, right? Like, think through the question that's coming and just spin it into what you want to tell them. Make sure you get out what you want to tell them. Don't hope that they caught it on the resume. Like be proud of, even if it's not on the resume, be proud of whatever you want to convey in that interview. And hopefully if they don't hear it, say it again.
I recently heard this thing that was like, even if you feel like your interview didn't go super well, at the very end, when they're like, do you have any questions and things like that, that's your opportunity to say like, okay, well, what qualities are you looking for in this candidate? And then they'll say like, oh, well, we want a leader. We want someone who can research independently, or whatever it is. And then that's your opportunity to say, well, that's so interesting. Well, I'm actually a really great independent researcher because XYZ. And so again, like, you get to go in there like with your own ammo.
I love that, Kate. I'm gonna have you start doing mock interviews with our students. No, but I think this is all such great advice, and I think exactly what and I'm gonna totally steal the Swiss Army knife too, Dan, because that's great. I love that as well. But I think what you're all saying is it's such great advice, and interviewing is a skill, right? It takes practice. And some people are better at it than others, but even if you feel like you're a good interviewer, you're still always going to have those nerves. And so the more practice, the better. So I think that's great advice, and we can help with that. So leverage career development. We do lots of interview strategy meetings. We do lots of mock interviews. So I tell every student, before you get in front of your actual employer to do your interview, do a mock interview with us, because let's practice, to Carl's point, telling that story and spinning kind of what you want, making sure you're getting out the key points and stories and examples that you want to really share. And it takes practice to do that. So that's great advice. Thank you. Students, I'll remind you, if there's questions, like Becky and I will keep moving along, but please feel free. This is for you. So if there's questions that any students have, you can unmute yourself, you can ask, you can drop them in the chat. So I'll pause to see if there's any questions right now. Otherwise, I'll keep going. Okay. So I guess kind of tied into some of what we've been talking about related to kind of presenting yourself effectively, both kind of on paper and maybe in that interview setting. I also want to talk a little bit about networking, because that's such a key part of this whole process. So I'd love to hear from all the alums around kind of your take on how you've networked effectively, if you feel like it's important when trying to land an internship and job, and just kind of your experience in that space and what advice you have for students around networking. So anyone can jump in.
Invaluable.
Invaluable.
And so it's so easy. It's something that's like, or that even when I was a senior, or throughout my time at Holy Cross, it was just this like, I don't want to do that. That seems so hard. I don't know how to do it. It is a matter of like having your message that you can like copy paste. That I think mine was like, hi, my name is Kate Hershey. I'm also a Holy Cross alum and I'm really interested in what you do. And you make it fit the LinkedIn character limit and you fire that away 10 times a day. And if you get one person back, then that's your opportunity to network, to talk to them, just to hear about their jobs. It doesn't, like I said, like go in with questions, like do your due diligence, learn about that person and their job and their company. So you have good questions to ask. But even if it is just a matter of, I'm thinking about a career in sustainability, or I'm thinking about a career in finance consulting, they'll be happy to talk to you. It takes 10 minutes and you have one new connection that you are front of mind if they ever have a job that comes up, or even if it's not a matter of like, oh, I have somewhere at my company that'll fit perfectly. It's, oh, I have 3 people that I know who I can get you in touch with. And yeah, people are always really, really generous in that.
I would also echo that the Holy Cross network is invaluable. My current role, I reached out to someone at Hagerty who worked, or a Holy Cross grad who worked at Hagerty, and that's how I got the job. So definitely, point A there. One advice for networking would be definitely to start early. The first time you talk to someone, you don't want to be asking them for favors or, them to review your resume. You want to build that rapport first. A good example of this, my brother is actually a Holy Cross grad as well. He's about to finish up his last year of law school, but his job that he has when he is graduating, he started building that connection, I think his first year of law school. And they just had that rapport all throughout his law journey. And so, you just want to build those connections first and then ask for favors. You don't want to ask for favors right away.
Great advice. And how do you, thinking about one of the questions we get often from students, and that reminded me, Julie, as you were talking, is you kind of create that networking connection, right? You create that initial connection with maybe an alum. And then what advice do you guys have for how you continue to like cultivate that relation? Like, how do you stay in touch with the alum? So to your point, Julia, your brother kind of connected with that person early on, and now he's about to graduate. So like, what advice would you all have for how you keep in touch, like after that first initial maybe phone call or discussion, to keep that relationship going?
So I think I'll take this. I think it's a really good question, especially for this consulting focus here, because you're going to do this for networking, and then you're going to do this for your client base going forward. You're going to spin it around and say, how do I stay involved with my clients if I finished a project? I want that to become a recurring client, so I need to make sure I'm staying on top of these contacts. So just like what I do for clients is I keep a running list of who I've spoken to and the last time I've spoken to them with. It doesn't have to be that detailed, and if you're not an Excel person or something like that, you don't have to do that way. But be mindful of your conversations. I haven't spoken to this person in a while. We caught up. I LinkedIn them. 6 months ago and they said there's nothing right now, but there might be something down the road. Or they started a job a year ago. Those anniversary updates are easy ways to say, hey, congratulations. Would love to hear how you're doing on your first year at your job. All of a sudden that person will love to talk about what they did for the last year, and then you can work your way into that. And I agree with what Julia said. Don't come in just asking for favors right away. Try to build up some sort of relationship. We all understand why you're reaching out for the most part. So we want to help you. Holy Cross is really, really dedicated to that and likes to, promote within. So, be patient, but be persistent. Back to Kate's point, if think of it like a batting average, three out of 10, that's 300. You're gonna get in the Hall of Fame. So that's a good success rate. Keep at it and keep reaching out to people.
That's great, Carl. Thank you. Any other thoughts or any other advice around networking?
I echo everybody's points. And one thing I would say too is obviously no one likes to do it, and it's a little uncomfortable reaching out of the cold and trying to get people on the phone. Two things I would add is just if you do get someone on the phone, do not waste their time. Like, please come in with questions prepared, have it be genuine. It's really easy for us to tell when someone's just doing a check the box exercise versus someone's actually really interested in what you do and truly are trying to learn more about what you do. Second, with those LinkedIn messages, the emails and stuff, if you don't get a response the first time, follow up again. I am big time a victim of this. And if I did this to anybody on this call currently, I'm sorry, but I am truly, truly horrible about replying to a LinkedIn message or replying to an email, because in my head, I just check it off as if I did it. And then I realize a month later it didn't happen. That happens, give it 10 days, 2 weeks, whatever, follow up again. And chances are it genuinely was just an oversight and a mistake. And we'll rectify it from there on out.
That's great advice. Persistence is key, right?
Persistence. Yes. Perfect.
So I know we've got about 5 minutes left. So what I would love to kind of end with, we've got a question. I want to end with that question, actually. This is perfect, Shannon, because it's very similar to what I was going to ask. So Shannon's asking, what's the biggest lesson you've learned as a consultant? So I'd love to hear from the alums about that.
It's a loaded question, Shannon. It's a really good one. I'll try to kick it off. Hopefully my panelists will save me if I flounder here. But the biggest thing that I've realized is to tie this back to networking. It really doesn't stop. As a consultant, your career is 100% in your own hands. If you want to go do something and you put your mind to it and put the research in, put the effort in, and bring it to the right people and your right contacts, you can just make your career out of essentially what you want it to be. Obviously, granted, that is under the assumption you have good managers, good support, all that kind of stuff. But for the majority, I think that's probably the case at the firms for the folks on this call. So it's in your own hands. Recognize that, and there's often places in consulting where you can skirt by and just keep your job and kind of hide in the bushes, but there's also opportunity for you to really make something great out of your career, as long as you kind of just put your mind to it and continue the networking, continue the research, be a sponge, learn as much information as you can. And I think that's just, hopefully it's continuing to pan out for me. Carl, I know you're coming up on the decade here. I wonder if you can continue upon this, but that's my biggest takeaway so far in my career.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on a lot of key points that are, I think I said in the beginning that it's still early, early innings for me, I hope. So just continuing to stay true to yourself, try to be hungry, but try to also remember what's important in life too. It's not all about just working yourself into the ground. It's about having some balance, whereas, it's hard sometimes, but you need to make sure you do that because, your legacy is going to be whatever you want it to be. And if you want it to be all work, that's fine. But, it's important to think about that. And the most part, for the most part, a lot of consultants get it. You know, they have families, they want to be social people, they're personable, they like to communicate. So don't be afraid of that side of the business too, because you might actually really excel on that side. But it's the foundation has to be core and good work, and that will help you get to that level, and then you can really excel by showing off your colors that you learn at a liberal arts school.
Great. Any final parting words of advice from any of the alums before we wrap up? Anything you wish you knew when you were a student?
I think one piece of advice that I would give is don't be afraid to apply. I know one of the things that I think you brought up, Kate, was, you might not have entry-level roles posted, but if you see something and it looks like an entry-level role, and for me, I was not a science major, and I said, I'm going to apply to this job in the life sciences anyways, even though last time I talked about biology was 11th grade. That just don't be afraid to try new things, whether that's applying, whether that's once you're in a consulting role and you say, hey, I really want to work with this client, this sector, because that all goes back to, being a Holy Cross student, asking more, really demonstrating that you have an interest and a passion, and that doesn't stop, once you apply, once you get the job, once you get the promotion that you want, even if it's not serving an end, it's going to allow you to have a better experience and have a more fulfilling experience in wherever you end up.
Yeah, I'm going to say that, similar to what Kyle's saying, is don't put so much pressure on yourself, on each part of your journey, your professional journey. I mean, things are gonna happen, and as long as you're paying attention and you're working hard and you're learning, you can get to where you want to be. And even if you don't know where you want to be right now, things will work out. Somehow you'll be somewhere in a job and say, wow, I really like this, or I didn't like that. But it takes time to understand that and to figure it out. So when you get that interview and you feel like you crushed it, and then you don't get the job, don't be so hard on yourself. Just shake it off and keep going and do the next one. And eventually something will happen. And everything else we've talked about networking and all of that, just try to remember the fundamentals, I'll call them, when you're going through the process.
I just want to build off of that. Don't compare yourself to your classmates either. 4 years from now, all of my friends, all of my classmates were probably not in the same companies or roles that we started in. If we've changed, we probably weren't happy in our initial roles. But 4 years ago, we were comparing ourselves and we were putting so much pressure and emphasis on that but you don't know how you're going to end up and how happy you're going to be down the line. So, you might be happy now, but just, I don't know how to wrap this up nicely, but just don't compare.
That's so true, Julia. Yeah, that's actually a great point. It's keep checking in with yourself, because I started at a place that I was happy for a long time, a long time. It was 2 years, and really enjoyed it. And I was learning a lot and I was really challenged. But then I kind of a little bit was getting am I happy here? I'm not really doing what I want to be doing. I do have all these great things, but something's missing. Sorry. And so, yeah, just keep checking in with yourself. Do I feel like I'm growing? Do I care about what I'm doing? Am I surrounded by people who are supporting me? Or do I just want to go try something completely new, which the answer to any of those is completely fine. Life is very long with many career pivots. So don't box yourself in.
Exactly. Great advice. I appreciate it. I think hopefully students, you kind of walk away tonight with just a really unique kind of perspective on all the different aspects and areas that you can really focus on within consulting, and some really good advice around just navigating the industry and networking and kind of presenting yourself effectively. So I really want to thank our 5 panelists, our alumni, who have spent a whole hour kind of sharing their expertise. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us tonight. It was really invaluable for our students. And then
Yes.
Becky, I'll have you kind of chime in and wrap up next steps.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Students, you can expect to hear from me tomorrow with some additional information and details and resources, but I encourage you to continue this conversation with me in an appointment. But otherwise, thank you, everyone, so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate your time, and I hope that everyone has a lovely evening.